Thanks for attending today's webinar where we will take a look at the 4 steps of dynamic risk assessments. I'm Elisa Dalton, the editor of Manufacturing Automation, and I'll also be your moderator for this session. Joining me today is our speaker, Jeremy Shorthouse of Molson Coors Canada. And before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. We're going to be asking some poll questions throughout the webinar, and we really encourage you to participate so we can get a better understanding of your experience and can tailor the presentation to be more relevant to you. And questions are welcomed at any time. You can submit them using the dialog box on your screen. There will be some time left over at the end of the presentation to answer them. And now, folks, following the Q&A, we will be asking just 2 very short and easy questions that we please ask you to fill out. We promise you that we'll take all feedback from this exit survey very seriously, and we'll use this information to help us design better webinars for you moving forward. Within the next week, this entire presentation will be archived on our website, so keep an eye out for an email and that download link from us. Feel free to share this information with your colleagues and anyone else in your network who aren't able to join us today. I'd like to say a very quick thank you to our sponsor, Omron Automation Safety, for making this opportunity possible. Look to Omron Automation Safety as your global partner for world-class machine safety and machine automation and safeguarding solutions that meet your needs for operator protection and increased productivity. Visit omron247.com to learn more. All right, so let's dive into the presentation now. Risk assessment is one of the most important tools in health and safety. All great and best practice health and safety management systems today require risk assessments to be completed in order to help identify, access, and control hazards in the workplace. Over the past 10 years, all new pieces of legislation and standards require that a risk assessment be completed prior to implementing a program or controls. In the next 40 minutes or so, Jeremy will talk about the importance of risk assessments and why all employees must be taught this safety practice. And at this time, I'd like to formally introduce our speaker for today. Jeremy has 20 years of health and safety and human resources experience in numerous manufacturing industries. He has helped reduce the health and safety statistics by over 75% at every company he's worked at. In 2010, Jeremy was named Safety Leader of the Year in Canada by Canadian Occupational Safety magazine. He holds an honors degree from McMaster University and has certified health and safety consultant designation. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Elisa, and hello to everyone across Canada and anywhere else that are tuning in. First of all, again, my name is Jeremy Shorthouse. I'm the National Environmental Health and Safety Manager with Molson Coors Canada, and I'm really excited to share this presentation with everyone today on the 4 steps of dynamic risk assessment. So as Elisa did point out, we're going to use some polls as we go through today. I think there's 3 questions, 3 polls. So I'd really like everybody to participate, because what that does is it allows me to be able to get a feeling or a feel for where everybody is when we talk about this presentation. The presentation today is really going to consist of a few things. One is we're going to talk just a tiny bit about theory, go back a little bit into safety, talk a little bit about theory. Then we're going to talk a little bit about risk assessments, a little bit about what the dynamic risk assessment is, and then at the end we're even going to do some case studies, some real small case studies where you can show, where we can show how this tool can be used by your workers and in your workplaces. So at that point in time, there's still going to be opportunities for questions and stuff throughout the presentation. So please pipe in whenever you would like to. So why don't we start off with our first poll, and it should pop up on your screen very shortly. So hopefully everybody's seeing it. If you could please type in where you are. This will give me a perspective of who we got in front of us. Wow, good voting. So we've closed the poll now, and again, this was just really, if you didn't get in, you'll get in the next ones. But it gives me a little perspective. It looks like we got about 50% of the folks are in the engineering operations group. 20% are health and safety professionals like myself. 14 in the management senior executive group, and then we have a small group in the human resources and even a few health and safety committee members. So a really diverse group, which will make the presentation that much more interesting today. So thanks for doing that first poll, and like I said, we'll be doing a couple more as we go through the presentation. So as I said, I thought we would start off a little bit on the theory a little bit with this. And just to go back and remember, what they have out there is the 3 ages of safety for us. And those 3 safety ages of safety were, of course, it started off with engineering, as we do have a large group of engineering. Safety then progressed into more of a systems approach. And for most of us now, depending on where your company is and stuff like that, you're also looking into this thing that we call behaviors. So from that perspective, I think it gives us a good idea to walk into the behavior side of things, which we're really, to a certain degree, going to be talking a little bit about systems, but mostly about the behavior side and talking about how we can get our employees more engaged into the safety program. So the next thing is to look at safety culture. And as you see on the screen, again, we're looking at our injury rate and our stuff, but on the bottom are the 3 sort of stages we look at for safety culture. There's the dependent stage, the independent stage, and the interdependent stage. The dependent stage typically is safety is the responsibility of management, and really there's little employee involvement. Then you get into more of the independent stage. As you progress your safety program more into those systems, I can prevent my own injury, and you start to see that increased employee involvement, whether it's through the Joint Health and Safety Committee or any other types of committees that you may have inside of your company. Then at the end there is our interdependent, which I think all of us hope we are at or are working towards getting to. And that interdependent safety culture is I can prevent not only my own injury, I can prevent my colleague from even being injured, and that you have 100% employee involvement in your health and safety program inside of your organization. So what I would like to do now is to do the second poll and to get a little perspective of where you feel your organization sits on the safety culture graph here, whether you're in the dependent stage, you're in the independent stage, or you're into the interdependent stage. We'll let it run for about 30 seconds. Good. Okay, so results there, the highest is that a lot of the group here thinks they're in an interdependent stage, which excites me, and that is great, because that means that you're have been through those 2 other stages possibly in your organizations. The next one is your independent. Few people not sure, and then only 9% in the dependent stage, which is really good. However, the dependent stage is still an area that you really need to concentrate on, and realistically, you need to find your way out of there. Usually the dependent stage is typically, you got to be out there and be safety police, and it's only the management's responsibility. So this is great because when we're going to be talking about dynamic risk assessments, I look at it as somewhere between a really high level independent stage and starting to move into interdependent and becoming part of your interdependent program. So it's somewhere, I would say it ranges in the 5 and 6, and you can push it to the highest level. So that's good. Thanks for participating into that one. So now that we know where everybody is, let's just talk about a couple of quotes when we talk about these. The dependent culture. Pride is not caring about my safety or my coworkers because that is management's responsibility. And for anybody that's worked in the safety field and stuff like that, sometimes in this stage you hear that safety is the safety department's responsibility, and really it's their responsibility. I'm just here to get my work done. If you're hearing that in the workplace, of course, you're at that dependent culture, and you might find situations sort of like this. We've all seen our famous pictures that we get from around the world, and some of the creative ways that people figure out how to do their jobs. But of course, that's not where we want to be in our safety culture. Then there's the independent culture. And this is one of my favorite quotes, that is, pride is doing something safely even when no one is watching. So really it's that stage where the employee is really looking out for themselves and really looking out and making sure that, you know what, I'm going to work safely no matter if my supervisor or my manager's around. I'm going to do it safely every time. And I use this picture just as an example because I'm sure for many of you that typically are driving around, you always see the roofers or the people working on roofs and stuff like that. Sometimes they don't have harnesses, sometimes they do. But when they do have the harnesses on, you might notice quite a bit that they're not actually clipped off. However, I'm sure if their supervisor or a labor inspector is around, I'm pretty sure that they'll make sure they're tied off. So again, the thought process is that the people are tied off no matter who's around or what they're doing, and it becomes just a part of their lives, taking care of that. So to move on, the interdependent culture. Pride is not only looking after your own health and safety, but taking care of your coworkers as well. So this is the stage where everyone is looking out for everyone in the organization, and that everybody wants to help each other. And if you see somebody doing something that's unsafe, you're going to stop them. The interdependent culture is really changing a little bit right now. I know inside of our organization, we're really spending a lot of time on positively reinforcing good behaviors versus always trying to find negative behaviors. It's part of our program we call Safety the Molson Coors Way. So it's a really good way to look at it so that you're looking at the positives from safety. So again, just a couple of pictures, employees looking out for one another, making sure that everybody's in a safe place. And then that real important part is about teaching your coworkers about safety. Don't tell them, involve them in it. And I think we've all been there from that perspective. So now I'm going to move into risk assessments. And before I do that, we're going to do our final poll just to give me a little perspective of the group again. And that poll that we're going to be doing right now is to determine how many people actually have done risk assessments. So are you doing risk assessments already inside of your organization? Okay, great. So again, it looks like the group that we have today is a majority of them are actually conducting a risk assessments, are doing risk assessments. We have a small group of 15% that are not, some groups that are not sure, which is not unusual from that perspective. This is great because this tells me a lot, and it tells me that the group is already really engaged in the risk assessment process, which hopefully dynamic risk assessments will add another attribute to your risk assessment program as we discuss that very shortly. For those that aren't doing risk assessments, don't be worried because we're going to talk a little briefly about what risk assessments are, why we do them right now. So a risk assessment is a process or tool where you identify hazards, then you evaluate the risks associated with those hazards, and then you find ways to eliminate or reduce those hazards. So just a little process or tool that many use. Why is it important? Well, it's important because I think everybody typically knows we can prioritize our hazards, and then we can put in the proper control measures to prevent future incidents, injuries, and illnesses. What it also does is it gives awareness of the hazards and risks to the employees. It can also identify who is at risk, and also it can be used to determine if the controls that you actually put in place and the proper control measures put in place, you can check and verify whether they're being effective or not. So just a little comedy as we go through there with a few pictures. Maybe next time you'll hand the risk assessment on time. Realistically, when it comes down to risk assessments, as most of us know, they're a proactive safety measure where we're trying to determine the risks and put the proper control measures in before something like an injury happens or a near miss or a serious accident. So just a little bit on legislation and standards around risk assessments. For everybody across Canada, if you look at any of your new provincial legislations, now they all state that you must do a risk assessment as part of the legislation or standards. So For example, I know some of the provinces have put in new confined space regulations or workplace violence, and any of the new legislation comes out there, the first requirement is, have you done a risk assessment? For some provinces like Ontario, and I think some others are moving towards this, is that thing called a pre-start health and safety reviews, which also includes risk assessments. There's a new CSA standard out there, probably not as new as it was a couple of years ago, but it's still relatively new in the CSA world, for occupational health and safety, hazard identification, elimination, and risk assessment and control. So really, when you look at it, risk assessments, it's not worth it, is of course the motto here. Is it, should the cat jump out to try to get the bird, or is it? And that's really what it comes down to from that perspective. So many people will ask, when do you do a risk assessment? Well, my whole motto is initially an overall risk assessment should be done for all sites. And then more detailed assessments can be done for the higher risk areas. And to give you a little example of that, if I was going new into an organization, one of the first things I would like to do as a health and safety professional is do an overall risk assessment to determine what are the highest risks we have in our facilities. Is it forklifts? Is it confined space? Is it lockout, tagout? Is it chemicals? Whatever the risk could be out there, and give me that overall risk. From there, that really helps me prioritize, or helps you prioritize what you should work on next. And for some of these, for example, if you were to do a risk assessment and find out that machine guarding is one of the higher risks in your organization, then the next steps would be to do more specific risk assessments with each machine to identify the risks and to put the proper guarding and control measures in place. So that's what I'm getting across with that one. Anytime you have new or modified equipment, some provinces has legislation where you're required to do it by law, others don't. However, I think it's a best practice that any new or modified work equipment, you do a risk assessment on it. Also, as you're going through process changes inside of your organization, anytime a process changes, I think that's another great time to step back, do that risk assessment again to see if any new or emerging hazards have identified themselves, or possibly even eliminated some of the risks and hazards. Here's one that's very big, and I emphasize this one a lot. Contractor work. I think most of us as health and safety professionals know that contractors are typically one of the toughest tasks that we have to deal with from a health and safety perspective out there. And putting in good risk assessments with your contractors and working with them on risk assessments is a really important thing, and can help reduce the risks inside of your companies quickly. Of course, a risk assessment can be done after an incident or accident. Maybe you did miss something during a previous risk assessment. That's more of a reactive side of it. And then regular reviews. Has anything changed? So again, it's stepping back, taking a look. Has anything changed? And if something has changed, you can do your regular review, just like your annual review of your health and safety program. Just another little one. And of course, this little comic I put in there just on the reality that during a risk assessment, you can't identify, and there's no sense in going in there and looking at risks that are not likely ever to happen, like a roof collapsing and stuff like that. Risk assessments are meant to be stuff that can happen at a more frequent time. So now I'd like to move over and get more into what this real topic was, and that's around these things we call dynamic risk assessments. And for dynamic risk assessments, another word or term that can be used sometimes for these is situational awareness. So if you recognize the term, sometimes you might hear it from that perspective. We use the term dynamic risk assessments, or DRA. And really, it's the continuous assessment of risk in the changing circumstances of an operation in order to implement the control measures necessary to ensure an acceptable level of safety. So just a quick quote on dynamic risk assessment. Dynamic risk assessments is a great tool for a couple of things. One is for employees that work generally alone or by themselves, and to have them have a tool or tool or possibly just a thought process when they can use, when they're not working, when they don't have anybody around that can help and assist them. For us inside of our organization, two key areas that we identified for dynamic risk assessment for our people, those are our people that deliver beer, and they're out on the road going to our customers, delivering it to our accounts. We, of course, they're by themselves all the time, so we teach them and train them in our SLAM process, which I'm going to talk about, which is our dynamic risk assessment tool. And then secondly is our maintenance crew. Our maintenance employees typically will come into a situation that is unique, that is always changing, and by teaching them the SLAM process, the thought process, the dynamic risk assessment process will really help give them another tool from a safety perspective in identifying the risks, putting the proper measures in place, and making sure the job is safe to do. So from my perspective, over my 20-year career, you know, from all the serious accidents and incidents I've had to unfortunately investigate over my time, it's really interesting to find that most of the time the situation that I look at is what I call something outside the norm. So it's a situation where something's happened or something's changed. It's not the normal process. It's not a normal thing that's happened. And the employees or the employee goes in and takes a chance or does something by not following a dynamic risk assessment approach, and takes that approach and unfortunately results in a serious or accident. So to move it on, what is SLAM and why do we use the term SLAM? From our perspective, one of our key principles in our health and safety program is to keep things simple. And sometimes people will say keeping things simple isn't giving us another acronym, because as we all know in human resources, health and safety and stuff, we love them. But I am going to give you a new one today. And that is what we use. Our program is called SLAM. And SLAM stands for stop, look, assess, and manage. So quickly, I think everybody can sort of get the concept here. Somebody goes up to a situation that's outside the norm, they haven't seen before, they're not sure what to do. You know, the first thing that we train our employees to do is stop. Think about the task at hand, take the time, don't rush it, engage the mind before engaging the hand. So stop, let's look at the situation, feel that we have the proper measures in place, and then move on. Look to see where the task is to be carried out. Check out the workspace, identify any hazards that may be there. And you know what, if there is that situation, you know, report it to your supervisor immediately. So they've stopped, now they're looking at the situation, determining how they can go about it. Is there a safe way of doing it? Is there any risks or any hazards? If that's the case, get some help. Then assess. So have the employee understand how to assess the impact of any of the risks on themselves, their coworkers, the equipment, the procedures, and the environment. And what we tell them is to ask themselves if you have the skills, training, and tools to carry out that task safely. So now that we've stopped, we're taking a look at it, we're assessing whether we think we can safely do the task or not, and we've done our assessment. And finally, the last part of it is manage it. So managing it means maybe you need to go get your proper personal protective equipment or something else, or get somebody else to help you. So manage and apply the appropriate controls and be certain to wear your proper PPE. If you don't feel safe, go back to that stop. Advise your supervisor and coworkers. And the key here is be self-aware, know your limitations, and don't attempt things outside your capabilities. And again, this is a real general concepts of it, but hopefully you've got a little bit of quick understanding on how the process is. And as I stated before, there's two sort of ways we do this. For some of our employees, like our maintenance team, we would teach them SLAM from a mental standpoint. Stop, look, assess, and manage. However, for our employees that actually go on the road, we actually have a little form that we use, which we call our SLAM form, which requires them to fill out once a month. When they go to a customer or somewhere where they see a hazard, they need to fill out a form and explain how they stopped, looked, assessed, and managed the situation. And a lot of that times it identifies a hazard or risk where the supervisor gets the information and has to follow up with the customer or the employee and talk about the situation. It also has become a really neat process because, as I said, we deliver our products to our customers, and when the information comes back that there's a specific hazard at one of our customers, we now actually input that information into our situation around I guess it's more of a computer program, and anytime that a listing or the next visit to that site comes up, the paperwork pops up. It actually has a little section on there of be aware of these hazards when going to that site. So if they're going to a bar where the stairs are tight or something like that, it will come up and it will warn them, or if they need any special type of equipment to move some product into place, that will pop up. So again, it's really taking SLAM to the next step, which is where now we have the risks identified before they're even going out to attempt to deliver it. So it's another way of using the SLAM process as we have it. So again, two ways I look at you can use it. One is just by teaching your people to think this way, think from a dynamic risk assessment approach, stopping, looking at the situation, assessing and managing it. And two is you can put a formal process in place where you can actually use what we call SLAM form or SLAM card, where you actually ask the people to write down what they're doing from this process. So now that we've talked about the theory, talked a little bit about risk assessments and where everybody sort of is, and we're talked really basically about what the 4 steps of dynamic risk assessments are, I thought the best way to do it would be to look at a couple of quick case studies. So our first case study is a forklift operator is moving some materials from one side of the warehouse to the other. So that's the situation. So because we couldn't use video on the webinar, I took in some pictures out of some great videos that I usually use for this, but it will do the same thing. So for the next minute, I just want you to quickly think about the situation you got sitting in front of you in this picture. So you've got a forklift operator who's obviously bringing a set of material into their warehouse, and we're going to act like they've been trained on the SLAM process and the dynamic risk assessments. So they're going to stop, look, assess, and manage the situation. So from a stop perspective, you hope they would stop and park their forklift, look at the situation in front of them, and notice that maybe it's a little tight of an area to be bringing whatever product they're bringing into the warehouse. Assess the situation, maybe do some measurements, maybe verify, and then lastly, manage the situation if they identify that it's too tight of a space to do some other moving of material or find another different way of bringing that material to the other side of the warehouse. So that's what you hope happens after teaching somebody SLAM. In this situation, the individual did not use their SLAM process and were not trained in SLAM. And as you can see, the end result is a really, really close call. And in fact, if you've seen the video before out there, the individual, jumps off their forklift, so their seatbelt probably wasn't on because they're not supposed to jump off their forklift, jumps on and runs away and gets away just in time. However, this whole set of racking does fall down and causes, I'm sure, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in product damage and all that. And this all could have been prevented by the individual following the dynamic risk assessment or the 4 steps of it and doing their SLAM process. All right, the next case study. An employee is asked by their team leader to get a box of cartons from a pallet in the dry storage area and bring to the production line. So this case study is actually a case study from one of my previous employers that we had dynamic risk assessments in. So that's why it was a good one to bring in and to share. because I just want to show you how simple SLAM can be. So here you get a situation where an employee is asked by their supervisor or their team leader to go do something, and then they approach it and they find this picture. So as you look at the picture, we've got 7 layers of what we call bag in a box in the day, and each of these boxes weighs about 50 pounds or 25 kg, so they're not very light. When the operator goes over to this area and identifies the situation here, the first thing that they identified was that these usually came in stacked 5 high. So they normally, when they go get them, it's at really below their shoulder or right at their shoulder height, not above their head. So the first thing that they did when they stopped, they looked, and their first assessment was something was different here. And their assessment was there's 2 layers higher than they're normally they have, and their assessment is by pulling this off 50 pounds, there could be the potential for a shoulder, a back injury. In this situation, they obviously couldn't fix it themselves, so they did go and approach their supervisor. That's actually their supervisor. Just took the picture when I was out there to use as an example. And the picture, the supervisor came over, looked at it, completely agreed with the operator, and what they did was they brought over a step stool to get it down for this production at that point in time. So they got it raised so that the box was at the shoulder level at a better ergonomic height for the operator to get these ones down. And once they did that, they got them all down to a safer level. The next step that the manager, supervisor did at that point, as part of the management process of SLAM, was they went and called the purchasing person immediately after to ask them why all of a sudden they were getting this shipment in 7 high versus they used to get it at 5 high. The quick answer back, as many of us would know, was if they bring it in 7 higher, it's cheaper. And as we know, sometimes the purchasing teams, our members, don't realize that sometimes their calls produce risks for us on the production or the operation side. So in the end, it was decided that the risk was high and it wasn't going to be that much of savings. So the next phone call was made by the procurement people to the Smurfit company or whoever is sending these to us, and we got them back to the 5-layer level as they were coming in. So I use that as a great simple example of the stop, look, assess, and manage system. Here's a simple situation where your employees would typically go over there and pull that box off without going through that SLAM process or even mentioning it to their supervisor, because they just want to get the job done. And the whole philosophy around the SLAM process is to really work hard at getting your people to stop, look, assess, and manage their situations, and when they see something that's outside the norm, such as this situation. So hopefully that gives you a perspective on how easy and how simple the SLAM can be used, and how it reduced the possibility of an injury or risk here in this situation. So we've got one more case study that I want to use, and again, interestingly enough, I took it right out of my own organization and thing. So this situation is another forklift operator goes to stack the 3rd pallet onto the finished goods. And this is what they see from their forklift as they finish putting the 3rd pallet up. So as many of you might see with using your quick identification here, is that this situation doesn't look very good, because it surely looks like the stacking hasn't been done properly, it's leaning, and of course there is the potential for it to tip over. So in this situation, in a good SLAM process with the employees trained, again, I think it's that situation where they would pull out, they would stop, they look, they see the situation doesn't look safe, they assess it that there could be a tip over, and they manage the situation by taking the products down and stacking them properly or readjusting the stacking. And that's the situation, again, you're trying to train your employees on when thinking from this perspective. In this situation, of course, the end result was not as good as it was. So as you can see, they did not do that, and at some point in time, back in behind there, this one had tipped over and dumped onto a forklift that was moving a pallet stack beside them. And as they moved it, the leaning of it leaned over and it fell right over on top of the operator. The good news, the operator was fine. There was no injury. I'm sure that the injured employee wasn't feeling so good after it, because that does become a scary situation when you get full product. Plus, we lost a lot of good beer. So either way, number one, no injury, which was good. We got very fortunate and lucky this situation. But again, the situation created, obviously, property damage. And I'm not sure how much a skid of beer goes for, but either way, it's obviously a property loss from that perspective. So I may be a little quicker than I intended because I hadn't done this before doing a webinar, but that's really the conclusion on where I sort of wanted to leave the group, to give that general perspectives of the 4 steps of dynamic risk assessment, and how you can easily implement something very simple, an acronym with a little training for your employees. And again, the key here is to try to get the employees to do that, which is probably the biggest and toughest task. But the training and showing people good case studies or examples, such as I have, there's some great videos online to use, really helps show the team and your employees that, you want them to look out for their safety as they're out there. You gave them the tool to use it, use the tool, and you're there as managers or whatever to support that that program. So I'm going to finish off with that, Elisa, and where I know we're done maybe 6 or 7 minutes early, but give us a lot of chance hopefully for some questions.
Thanks very much, Jeremy, for that presentation. We do have some questions in already, so let's get to those right away. Okay, so we've talked about the need to perform a risk assessment, but whose responsibility is it?
Yeah, risk assessment responsibility, I think, falls into, as we state for health and safety, everybody's situation. So typically, overall risk assessments are typically done by the management team or the EH&S professional, but I highly recommend when doing that, if that is the case, that you, of course, involve the employees, whether it's the Joint Health and Safety Committee, the Health and Safety Committee, or whatever other individuals you can from your perspective. Because as I always say, I'm not on the production floor, I'm not in the operator's feet very much, so they're the ones that can identify and help identify the risks a lot quicker. That's overall. When doing specific risk assessments out there, I think it depends on the expertise. So I think if we're doing something on explosion or fire or possibly machine guarding, arc flash, if you don't have the internal experts to help you do the risk assessments inside your organization, I think you definitely need to go out and look for a consultant and experts in that area to help take you through that risk assessment, identify those risks, and help determine and put in control measures to help you.
So I have a question here asking, is there a standard form or document to help with doing risk assessments?
Absolutely. There is this one we didn't really show any of the tools but I've done numerous presentations where we do risk assessments, and there's lots of different tools out there. And whoever did ask that question, I can surely you'll see my email at the bottom of the last page here. If you want to send me an email, I'll surely share some risk assessment tools with the group.
Okay, this is a really interesting question. So what should a worker do if they're the ones practicing safety in the workplace, but it's actually their manager or supervisor who isn't following safety best practices?
Wow, the ever famous question of the supervisor and the team leader. And I think that anybody that's been a safety professional or been in a situation has seen this scenario before, and that is where the employees feel like they're doing theirs, but they don't feel like maybe the supervisor or manager is performing the safety that at their level. You know, from that perspective, I think the best answer is you need to go to a certain degree above that person. Hopefully, the person above that manager or the director or whatever the person would be, you can go talk to them. I think there's always the option to go talk to the environmental health and safety professional if you have one of those in the organizations. And if you're a smaller organization, I think it's got to be brought up at the health and safety committee, because the health and safety committee, of course, is a combination, a group of both workers and managers that are working together in order to reduce hazards and reduce risks. So I think that, again, that's always a challenging and very, very tough situation. And I think depending on the circumstances inside the organization, I think you need to take it to somebody else, and hopefully they'll address it from their perspective.
Another question here. So SLAM has been used in the mining industry for a few years now. How do you keep it fresh and employees engaged so that the format SLAM just doesn't become a burden or pencil whipped like some inspection processes can become?
Absolutely great question. And again, there's different ways, of course, that we have in health and safety of incentive. So here's one of our key areas around here is when people are doing the SLAM process, we do a couple of things. One is if they're filling out and doing their SLAM process, as part of the SLAM process for us, the manager and supervisor gets these, and they're to go to and have a coaching session with the employee to pat them on the back for getting it done, doing it the right thing. So we really emphasize the positive side. You did identify a risk, you're putting measures in, or maybe the measures aren't put in place, but you've at least identified the risk, you're following the process. So we really emphasize a lot on positively reinforcing. Some of our other sites have set it up so that if you are doing your dynamic risk assessments or your SLAM processes, you might get in for a draw for something if you're doing your monthly card. So I think there's different ways of doing it. There's also a great way of refreshing people on why we do this. So I would say, whether it's a safety talk or a safety briefing with the group, I really highly emphasize to go out there and find some videos and bring them up and show them to the group to re-motivate the people, because most of the videos have a little comedy to them or a little fun, and I don't mean in the fun of, there's a risk and an accident happens. I think we all as professionals look at it from, wow, that really happened, and it sort of opens the eyes again. Again, today I just use some pictures and stuff, but typically when we use the training for this, we use some great videos, and you usually get chuckles and people talking a lot. So, it's, again, the toughest task of a health and safety professional realistically is trying to keep it fresh, and hopefully a few of those ways will help.
Next question is, what is the difference between a regular risk assessment and the dynamic one?
Okay, great question. So a risk assessment from a perspective is a risk assessment is really looking over the machinery, the tools, and the risks associated on a whole basis, where the dynamic risk assessment is really at the individual level. So overall risk assessments are identifying the hazards inside of your organization, putting the proper control measures in place from that perspective. The dynamic one is almost a mind thought process that you're putting inside your employees, that when they come up to a situation that is outside the norm or isn't something that they regularly see, that they stop, they look, they assess, and they manage the situation. So dynamic risk assessment is almost more of a tool to use as you're going along on your day-to-day work, where risk assessments are typically more formal and more to the point of identifying specific risks. So I don't know if I explained that perfectly well, but take it as I would do overall risk assessment first. From those overall risk assessments, my next steps would be to do inside an organization would be to do specific risk assessments with those real high specific risks. And then the next part of my process around risk assessments is to bring in dynamic risk assessments where we're teaching the employees on how to, when they do come up to a risk that they've never seen before, how to process through it.
Okay, next question. You talked about doing regular reviews. How often would you recommend doing a risk assessment?
Yeah, my motto has always been once a year, and when I say an overall risk and assessment review, that is pulling the document out with the Joint Health and Safety Committee possibly, and maybe a group of managers or whatever, and just really looking through and saying, okay, it does two things. One is you identify, make sure that all those risks are still there, they make sense, and you can also determine if you put any control measures in place to reduce the risks from that perspective. So it gives you an opportunity to really just to step back and look at it and say, hey, you know, as we go into 2016, you know, we've worked really hard at our top 3 risks, and I think we should, you know, spend some more capital or some more money on risks 7 through 10. So it really gives that opportunity to reassess, look at, have we got everything identified, have we got the proper control measures in place, and it really sets you up for planning and action planning, budgeting and stuff for the next year.
Mm-hmm. Another question here. Can you talk about another specific instance where you use the SLAM approach to help avoid an incident?
Well, to give another example of when I've seen it used.
Mm-hmm.
I'll use you know, where we use it the most, and that was when we have our drivers going to another property. So this winter we actually trained it to I'll call it our Quebec distribution folks in Quebec in, I think it was September, October-ish last year. And many situations came up where the driver went to the customer's place, and when they got out, weather, as we know in Quebec, can be bad at times, and it was very slippery, snowy, and it wasn't a very good opportunity for them to move product like kegs and beer into this bar. So it was an example that they used with their team. You know, so they stopped, they looked and assessed the situation, it was slippery, it was hazardous to get to the door itself, never mind down the stairs and into where it was. And how they managed the scene? They managed it by calling back to their supervisor, explaining the situation, and the manager said, if they don't have any salt or can't clear a proper safe path, we do not deliver the beer to them. So it was a good example of a manager backing up the SLAM process and backing up the program. The manager called the store. They identified that they did have salt. They came out and salted down the area. It took 15 or 20 minutes till the salt sort of took place. They felt it was safe at that point in time, and they delivered the product.
Very good. Okay, so we still have a little bit of time here for the Q&A, so folks, don't be shy, type in your questions. And as you can see, Jeremy's email is on the last slide here, so please feel free to reach out to him and connect with him if you have additional questions or you want to get some examples and these videos that he was talking about.
Absolutely.
So Jeremy, have you come across an instance where you're at a workplace and there's a certain employee that you just can't get through? It doesn't matter how you try and approach this. It doesn't matter what kind of videos you're showing them. They just aren't willing to work with this best practice. How do you deal with this?
Okay, so that's again those ever famous questions, and I'm gonna answer it sort of in my philosophy on that perspective. You're never ever going to change everybody's philosophy and mentality. You can work hard at it, you can do it, and of course, on the behavioral side, you always have the access to progressive discipline and following that process if it's that serious of a situation. However, I look at it the other way of, you know what, if we're only going to concentrate on that one or that small percentage group of employees that just don't buy in it and forget about the 95 or 98% of all our employees that do it and do it well, I would rather you spend and concentrate your time on that 95%, 98%, because if you only spend your time with the one individual or the other individual, the other 95% might start saying, well, obviously that you don't care and stuff like that. And I go back to that emphasis of, you know, we always love to identify bad things. Let's identify good things and let's pat people on the back and give out the good thanks and so on when people are doing the right things in safety. I don't think any company does that well enough. We are working really hard at Molson Coors to build a positive work environment where our managers and our team leaders go out and identify people doing things right and pat them on the back saying great job versus always going out there to try to identify things that are wrong. So my comment would be you do your best to try to change somebody. If you know you're never going to change them, you know, don't continue all your efforts on that. Work on your 95 to 98% and keep them happy and positive, because that's a way higher percentage that you're going to win on.
Very nice. Okay, and we have a question here asking if one of those sample forms can be sent out or posted onto our webinar recap, our webinar archive. So Jeremy, would we be able to organize that? You could send us the form and then we could post it with the video?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I can, two ways. I mean, if somebody sends me an email, I can send the forms and stuff out over the next week or two, and vice versa. If we can figure out a way with you, Elisa, to put it on the site and stuff like that, I have no problem in sharing stuff. It's, you know, as in the safety world, as we all know, we're never trying to reinvent the wheel. So yeah, we can surely share the forms that we're using across Canada.
Okay, great. So I don't see any more questions coming in. So you know what? Let's wrap this up and we'll get you guys out of here a little bit early. All right, so thank you very much for taking the time, everyone, today. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be a very short survey that will appear on your screen at the end of this presentation. Please take the time to fill this out. Your feedback is crucial in helping us design better webinars for you in the future. Thanks again to Jeremy for this informative discussion. His contact information is on the screen. I encourage you to please connect with him if you have any additional questions. Thanks again to our sponsor, Omron Automation Safety, and last but not least, all of you for taking the time to join us today and for your continued support. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation. Have a great rest of the day.